Hi and welcome to the Property Development Derisked podcast, where we talk all things pre-construction, basically everything before a spade goes into the ground. We get the experts in to help you keep your projects on track. Today's episode is a Supplier Insight episode where we bring one of RenKap's expert partners in to help you answer questions regarding a specific niche. This week we are discussing tree surveys with Matt Harmsworth from Roavr Group. Hi Matt, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
No problems at all. It's a bit strange to be on this side of the desk for a change. So I'll try and do my best to be an interesting guest for your awesome listeners.
Yeah, excellent. You're a podcast pro, and people that are watching this can see in the background. You've got the setup, and you've got the great thing about having you on board is you've got all the best microphones and headphones, and hopefully the quality is really good here.
We try. Yeah, I know, that's strategically positioned, isn't it? Really, back in the days when I was fit, but there we go.
So Matt, please feel free to kind of expand a little bit about Roavr Group, what you guys do, the surveys that you offer. Obviously, we're working with you on several surveys, and first let's start there.
Perfect, thanks. So yes, Roavr Group is basically, our tagline is we help people get their planning back on track, and we do that through a number of different ways. So there's three verticals to the company, but there's only two verticals that are relevant to your listeners, and one of those is arboriculture, and one of those is ecology. So essentially, anybody who is submitting a planning application anywhere in the UK, if there are trees within the red line boundary or adjacent to the red line boundary of that site, then what they need to have a tree survey carried out. And there's numerous different steps to that, which we'll come on to. I myself, I'm an arboricultural consultant by trade. I'm the director of Roavr Group. We've got various offices across the UK. Our headquarters is up in Inverness in Scotland, which causes quite a few problems, as you can imagine, when most of our work tends to be in London and central London. When people have an Inverness phone number pop up on their screen, they look very confused. For me, it's normal. I'm travelling around the UK all the time, but it's a bit surprising for most people. So
and your team covers a lot of the UK anyway.
They do. Most of our staff are in the sort of Greater London area. So yes, it's a bit of a strange one, really. But it's because I wanted to live in the beautiful Scottish Highlands. Yeah. It's as simple as that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm an arboricultural consultant by trade. I got into drones about 10 years ago, and it was very, very early on because I've got a background in aviation. Very enthusiastic about aviation. And playing with model toys that flew was kind of a natural follow-on for that. So I took a huge diversion away from being a tree surgeon and then an arboricultural consultant for about 7 to 8 years. And the reason I moved away from it is because I got so disillusioned and disheartened with the planning system in the UK, the frustrations, both for our customers and also for us as consultants as well. All the sort of problems that your listeners will be probably familiar with, and if they haven't been exposed to them, they're going to be exposed to them through this podcast. And I just became very disillusioned with it. So I thought, what can I do? I could use drones to inspect trees and look at forests and things like that. But I was just far too early to market. This was back in like 2012, 2013, when the little drones with the little white ones with the 4 motors on that you see on the BBC News every time something goes wrong, they were just starting to come on the scene. But the vast majority of commercial drones had to be hand built and put together, and all the sensor payloads and everything on the drone had to be sourced independently, and we were just really, really early to market. Yeah. So we went off on a tangent and we got involved in filming and inspection work and then survey work, and it's gone totally full circle now. We've built this system that helps people get their planning on track with trees and ecological surveys, and now every single surveyor within the company has a little mini drone in their van or in their car, and
you brought drones back into your core.
That's it. Yeah. But it
talking about the filming that you were doing with some drones. show us behind you. Your picture with Anthony Hopkins.
This is everybody. Well, this is no good for people that are listening. So there he is, Mr. Hopkins. I spent 3 months with him filming a film that I very much doubt any of your listeners have heard of, unless they've got children under the age of 16, which was called Transformers: The Last Night. So we spent 3 months shooting all over the UK, and I was the aerial coordinator for that, which basically just makes sure things don't bang into each other. Yeah, we've done James Bond and Country File and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was
amazing.
Good.
Amazing. It's every time I speak to you, Matt, I feel like I learn so much more. I don't really. There must be like 3 of you. The amount of stuff that you're getting involved with. But just going backwards to kind of your how you first got into this industry, and your family kind of worked on the canals, and you were. Can you just tell a little bit about that story? You were kind of dealing with trees and the land in that area, and
so. Trees and me go right back to childhood. Really, I've got a book you can get on Amazon called Unmanned, which dives into this. So I showed you one book before we started recording. There's another one as well, which gives you my kind of history. And I don't actually like talking about myself a great deal, so you're doing well to try and prize this out. but yeah, essentially, my father worked at the Royal Aircraft Establishment in Farnborough. He basically he made models for wind tunnel testing for things like Concorde and Tornado and the Space Shuttle and Polaris missiles, and he was a very, very clever chap. But I'm not going to say he burnt out, but I guess in modern parlance, that's what it would be. And he moved he became a countryside ranger for Hampshire County Council. And he became this countryside ranger on something called the Basingstoke Canal, which kind of links us together with a little bit of your backstory. And the link with the Basingstoke Canal, my family actually used to own the Basingstoke Canal in the 1800s. My great-great-grandfather bought it to safeguard his pleasure boat business. So he used to rent out rowing boats to soldiers at Aldershot. And as the canal fell into disrepair as the railways came along, he had to buy the canal to safeguard his pleasure boat business. But the family got rid of it, I think, probably in about 1930, something like that, just before the Second World War, and it became derelict. The local authorities, Hampshire and Surrey County Council, decided that they would restore it and run it as a country park, and that started in about the 1960s. I was born in 1977, so by the mid-80s, in my sort of formative years, 8, 10, 11, I was going to work with my dad every day, driving canal boats. And back in those days, the canal was still very overgrown with trees. So there was lots of chainsawing, there was lots of bow sawing, there was lots of hands-on tree-related things.
Sounds like a bit of a dream for a teenager, doesn't it?
It was awesome. I mean, I speak to my son now, James, and he gets super excited about, riding a motorbike or driving an electric car or playing a computer game or something. All I wanted to do was go to work with my dad and drive diggers, as sad as that sounds. But it was, it was a fantastic childhood. And when I was in my early teens, I thought, influenced by Top Gun, believe it or not, I decided that, I wanted to be a fighter pilot or a helicopter pilot or something like that. But I wear contact lenses and my eyesight wasn't good enough. Nowadays, you get away with it, but back then that was just end game. So I thought, well, if I can't go to the Army Air Corps and fly helicopters, what else would I like to do? I'd like to play with diggers and chainsaws. That sounds kind of cool. So what I did was I went to Merriswood College down in Guildford in Surrey, and I did a 3-year course in countryside recreation. And then following that, I got a job with Surrey County Council as a countryside ranger, and I worked on their countryside teams. And I built up all my practical skill set. While at Surrey County Council, I also went to Merriswood College and did an arboricultural course for climbing to become a climbing arborist. And then in the early 2000s, I started my first business as basically as a countryside management, countryside contracting organisation, because there was an awful lot of grant funding available from Europe for bringing SSSI, sites of special scientific interest, back into favourable condition. So we provided hands-on contracting services for restoring heathland mainly. But as that money started to dry out and the work and the projects disappeared, I started to do residential and commercial arboriculture, so basically tree surgery. That encompassed everything from big, large-scale commercial-style house developer projects through to cutting and pruning Mrs. Miggins' apple tree and hedges and things like that. Did that for about 10 years and realised that what I was actually doing was destroying my body. And I sold that business and I stepped sideways, or I sold the customer base of that business, and I stepped sideways into arboricultural consultancy. So I did a series of vocational and professional qualifications to become an arboricultural consultant. And I went to work for a chap called Scott Fairley in North Wales, and he really developed me and brought me on as an arboricultural consultant. And I slowly moved north into the far north of Scotland, working for various different projects. But I kept all my consultancy customers all across the UK. So just me as a single individual was serving multiple customers all across the UK, and it wasn't unusual to jump on a motorbike and drive through the night down to London to do an arboricultural survey for a big housing scheme.
That's insane.
Then drive all the way back. It was totally insane and utterly ridiculous, which is one of the reasons that, you know, we've developed the systems and the processes and the ways of doing things now very, very similar to the RenKap platform, because, you know, it means the customer journey is consistent. They get a consistent service. They're not reliant on one of my team. They get the same experience every time they come to the business. So yeah, that's kind of how we ended up.
Yeah, amazing. It's really interesting to see all the different elements of your background and how they fitted into what is Roavr Group today, which answers a lot of questions. But it's awesome to kind of see all those kind of expertises brought into one, which is really cool. So we've been working with each other over, I think, since the course of this year. You come on board on the RenKap platform. We've done a few projects together, and increasing that. And in terms of kind of what we want to talk about in this session, the tree surveys.
Yes.
You believe that they are a misunderstood part of the planning process, and kind of wanted to share a little bit of your insights for that. What did you mean by that?
It's a huge subject, this. So I guess without teaching your listeners to suck eggs, we'll start right at the very beginning. So anybody that is submitting a planning application, if there are trees on or adjacent to the site, they have to have a tree survey carried out that complies with the British standard BS 5837 2012. It's currently going through the process of being updated, and we're hoping some of the ambiguity will come out of that, but I think that's probably a couple of years away. Now, there are people that go through their entire property development life cycle, career, without ever coming across the need for a tree survey. However, in almost all local planning authorities' guidance and policy, it stipulates that a tree survey will be required. However, on the planning form, there's a little tick box which says, are there any trees on or adjacent to your site? And that tends to not get ticked. Now, whether that is intentional or not, I don't know. If that little box isn't ticked, then that planning application or that particular individual, their experience could be that they've never required a tree survey on any of their projects for many, many years. And then all of a sudden, up it comes. If the box is ticked, then what will happen is that the planning officer will quite often go onto Google Street View, go onto Google Earth. They'll have a look. They'll see what type of tree cover there is. They'll do a few searches online to see whether the trees are protected by tree preservation orders or whether they're in a conservation area. And then they'll go back to the applicant and they'll say, we're not going to validate your application because you've not provided a tree survey. And this comes as a huge shock. And it's not just small residential schemes, it's quite large developments that this comes up on. Even national infrastructure projects, local authority projects, we see this all the time. And
that's important as well. It's not just housing, is it? It's all types of developments. Could be schools, could be hospitals, could be HS2, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And also permitted development as well sometimes, which is not relevant to your listeners, so I won't go into it. But even permitted development, if there's a tree there that's got a tree preservation order on, they're still going to need a tree survey. And, you know, the reason it's misunderstood is because what tends to happen is people say, well, the trees are, you know, they're a long, long way away, or there's a misunderstanding of tree root morphology as well. Most people seem to think that tree roots go directly down to, I don't know what depth to hold the tree up in the air, whereas the reality is the vast majority of tree roots sit within the top half a metre of soil. They go out as far as the crown spread, the branch work above ground of the tree, if not sometimes a lot further. And tree roots are advantageous and they seek out the best growing conditions. So the actual morphology when you're looking at trees in the built environment can be really, really complicated, and the developer has an obligation to ensure that they don't damage those trees. And the way that they do that is by having this tree survey carried out. And
just a question on the tree survey, sorry, Matt.
Yes.
You said if there's any, when it's required, is if there's any trees on the site or adjacent to the site.
Yes.
That's a bit ambiguous, isn't it? What does adjacent to a site mean?
Absolutely. So we tend to say within 15 metres of the site boundary, because a lot of local authorities will say within 15 metres of the development. So that in itself is quite ambiguous, because you could have a site that's huge, that's just having a very small extension built on it and the trees are miles away, or you could have, you know, a site that's heavily treed right around the periphery, and you know, there's multi-unit housing development going in there, and all the trees are going to be affected.
Would it be as easy to say? Would it be as simple as saying if any trees are overhanging onto the site, or are you saying even that's too close?
Yes, that's too close, really, and I've got a wee anecdote on that particular point later on. But yes, I mean, if there are trees on the site or up to 15 metres beyond the red line boundary of the site, then they need to be considered. And what we tend to say to people is that if you're in any way concerned whatsoever, you know, build a relationship with an arboricultural consultant or a consultant practice, and get some feasibility information early on, even if that's just a Google Earth extract or something. Send that over to your preferred contractor, and they can just have a very quick look at it and go, yes, this is going to be an issue, or no, it's not. And then you can progress to your proper site site investigation. So
cool, excellent. Okay, so there you go. You know when you need one. If there's any trees on the site or adjacent within 15 metres of the red line boundary.
Absolutely, definitely. And I mean, there are three stages really to the tree survey side of things. So when somebody says a tree survey, the tree survey itself really is just the site works. So that is where a technician or a qualified individual will go out to site and they'll capture physical measurements on the tree. In order to capture those physical measurements on the tree, they really need a topographical survey. Most arboricultural consultancies do not have the ability to pick up tree positions accurately. And when I say accurately, I mean within a couple of metres. We're not talking millimetres as if we're talking built footprint, but within a couple of metres is the sort of accuracy you're looking for on a tree survey. Sometimes even more accurate than that is required. So they need a topographical survey. They'll go to the site with a tablet computer device or a handset that has a degree of positioning capability, and they'll pick up information on the trees. That bit is the tree survey. That information comes back to the office, and that forms essentially a asset register of the trees on site. That data is not a lot of use to you really at that stage. Beyond the tree survey, the site works, you need what's known as a tree constraints plan. So that is where that's the most useful output to the design team, to your design team. And what that will show is it will show the trees positioned accurately to the topographical survey. It will show the root protection areas, which is a 2D design tool. So that's the below ground constraints. It will show the crown spread of the tree. And sometimes we'll also put lower branch heights, because that forms a problem for access and egress, and also shading and shadows and all that kind of stuff. And that initial piece of work is what the design team will then use to ensure that their project respects the root protection areas of trees and isn't going to negatively impact the tree population. So that's the bare minimum that somebody would need through your platform.
Yeah, and that is the BS 5378. Did I say that right?
BS 583720. I know it rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the guidance within that. That's the initial tree survey, arboriculture survey, and obviously I know because we've done many projects together. Is the trees are assessed with different categories, A, B, C, and U. Is you the last one, right? Yeah.
So the problem is with trees, both within the British Standard and out with, is that everything is very subjective. It's not like architecture or structural engineering where you can look at something and go, this is the load that this I-beam will take before it fails. It's all very subjective with trees, and your arboricultural consultant would hopefully have many years experience and can take a pragmatic and sensible view of these things, but quite often it can be quite difficult when you then butt heads with the local authority tree officer who might have a different view on the category rating. But yes, the category rating of trees starts at A, which is the highest quality rating. Then you've got B, which is sort of a medium, C, which is sort of lower value trees with a limited useful life expectancy, or trees that are quite young and perhaps easily replaceable. Very small tree could perhaps be dug up and moved. And then you've got U category trees, which are poor quality or form sort of no constraint to the development. Now, it is very subjective. There are 3 subcategories under all of those. You've got arboriculture value, landscape value, and amenity value, conservation value. So arboricultural value, if you imagine, I don't know, you're watching some sort of period drama, and there's a beautiful copper beech tree in the middle of a lawn outside a mansion house. Beautiful shape to it, there's a swing underneath and the lassie's in there swinging up and round and being pushed by Mr. Darcy or whatever. That would be a sort of an A category tree to my mind. The vast majority of trees tend to fall in the lower category, which is B. And then C category trees tend to be ones of kind of lower quality with a limited useful life expectancy.
Yeah, and those categories, they would be kind of defined within the register of the trees, and also within the tree constraints plan. You'll be able to see the number of you'll be able to see the reference for that tree and be able to see that it's okay. That's the type A. That's the type B. They're
color coded, so the design team can look at that tree constraints plan and very quickly go, well, okay, there's a C category tree in our way. There's a good chance we can build a case for the removal of that tree with suitable mitigation planting, or there's an A category tree next to this building or in the middle of this site. We're going to have to develop plans around this tree or come up with some seriously robust mitigation.
And something quite key that you said that we see come up quite often is the fact that sometimes the client will ask us for a tree survey before they have the topo.
Yes.
And obviously causes challenges, because if you want to have an accurate representation of where those trees are, you need the topographical survey first, and in reality, the topographical survey doesn't just affect tree surveys. It affects a lot of other stuff, utilities, everything else. Also, the design team probably needs that one at first. So,
it's the building block. It's absolutely essential. And anything but the smallest of projects, the topographical survey is it's a non-negotiable building block to the whole site investigation pack, really. Yeah.
And then one other thing you mentioned, the root protection area. So this is obviously, as you discussed, the roots under the ground, and the tree cannot live without its roots. So there's a specific formula, isn't there, for calculating a root protection area? Could you kind of high level explain how that works?
Yeah, so at a high level, we take a measurement around the stem of the tree with a specially calibrated tape measure.
So this is the trunk.
The trunk of the tree, yes. And we then apply a calculation to that, which gives us a root protection area to apply to the drawing, which is shown usually as a circle. The British standard does allow that circle to be changed to a polygon to reflect site scenario. So if the tree's right up against the house, it's likely that the root mass is offset to one side. However, once again, it's very subjective. You have to be able to justify, if you change the shape of the RPA to a polygon, you have to be able to robustly demonstrate that, which is actually where our drone shots often come in. And the deer drone shot directly above looking down will quite often tell the story much better than a 2D plan. What should be noted is that the root protection area is not an absolute. It is the minimum viable area that tree needs to grow, needs to survive at that particular point in time. So, if it's a tiny little tree, it might only have a root protection area of a couple of meters. Well, that doesn't mean to say you can build all around it, because if that tree in maturity is going to be, 50 times the size, then it's going to need a much, much bigger area.
But if it's smaller, then it might also be a category C.
Exactly.
Which you might be able to move.
Yeah. Which is where, the second part in the process comes along, which is the arboricultural impact assessment. So once the project lead has developed some plans, they will need to validate their planning application, an arboricultural impact assessment as the bare minimum. And that's the actual PDF output report that you'll get from your arboricultural consultant, and that discusses what effect the development will have on the trees and what effect the trees will have on the development, because a lot of all local planning authorities are concerned as to what pressure the trees will come under for unsympathetic pruning moving forwards into the future, when the residents move in, or whatever the land use is, and the inevitable complaints about leaf drop, sap on the cars and all that starts to come. So
yeah, with arboricultural impact assessments, this is interesting, because sometimes I also see the order of things is really important, I think, in terms of for someone developing a site. And sometimes what I see is that they'll request an arboricultural impact assessment. Obviously, in order to do one, you need the new designs. So yes. You need to know what the existing building is and what the proposed development is, and the arboricultural impact assessment will basically compare the trees against that new design and see if there's any clashes. Am I right in terms of root protection areas and the building? And typically what we would recommend is the client should have already done the tree survey, then design the scheme, knowing where the root protection areas is. So when you get to the arboricultural impact assessment, there shouldn't be any clashes.
No, yes, that is, and certainly, I certainly say to my team, because on the smaller low-level residential schemes, you can imagine there's all sorts of conflict, particularly when they've submitted their planning application without a tree survey, and then we rock up and go, well, this is unbuildable because you've got a large protected tree adjacent to your property. But to address your point fully there, essentially, the way that we work is that on the larger schemes, if we see there's conflict, there will be dialogue, there will be consultancy backwards and forwards between the design team and the arboriculturalist to come up with a layout that is sympathetic to the trees. Then, as you say, that report will be written to go in and support the planning application. There's no point us outputting a report that is, that is damning. The only time sometimes that we will send out an impact assessment on a scheme that is it doesn't favour the trees is if there's a really long timeline. So on some of these big infrastructure projects, we will issue a report that says, 100 A category trees need to be removed, so they know fully exactly where the issues are potentially going to lie politically sometimes. So yeah, excellent. And in terms of arboricultural impact assessment and doing the tree surveys, would you always recommend, like, what's the process, what's the structure? Because I'm trying to, in my mind when we were talking, I was trying to think to myself, there is definitely kind of a step-by-step process that needs to happen here in terms of step one, topo, Yeah, absolutely. So you're quite right. Step one is the topographical survey.
Yeah.
Significant trees need to be picked up as individuals during the topographical survey, and in some cases the crown spreads as well is really, really useful. That is why quite often we recommend a desktop feasibility study for schemes where there are a lot of trees on or adjacent to the site, because we can have a quick look at it. We've done this recently for a scheme in Wrexham in North Wales. They're extending a business park, comes into conflict with trees that were planted as part of the formal setting out. So there's thousands of them all very close together. Clearly it's impractical to pick all those up as individuals. So we can then inform the topographical surveyor what data needs to be picked up, and that in turn helps reduce the client costs. So topographical survey first. Once the topographical survey has been done, the arboricultural consultant can go to site, they can capture the data. Once they've captured the data, or certainly what we do, once we've captured that data, it comes back to the office. We'll produce the arboricultural data tables, the asset register, and the tree constraints plan. We will issue that as a PDF and also as a .dwg to the customer with feedback, and our feedback is done through video, clearly explaining exactly what's going on, where the constraints and where the opportunities are. And at that point, we would take a step back and we'll say, right, if you've got any queries, come back to us. And invariably, a few weeks goes by, and then the dialogue starts backwards and forwards with the design team to build a layout that's acceptable. And then the arboricultural impact assessment will be carried out, which is the reporting that we've discussed. And at that point, you've usually got enough information to support a planning application and get it validated. There is a final step, which is the arboricultural method statement and tree protection plan. So if you've got a large complex site where you're developing either very close to the root protection areas of trees or sometimes within the root protection areas of trees, the local authority will want an arboricultural method statement and a tree protection plan before they will issue planning consent. And that document talks about how the trees will be protected through the development phase. And it also gives them a plan which will show the location of things like tree protection fencing, ground protection boarding, and all that kind of stuff. Where it all sometimes falls down is if a development has gone right the way through, it's got successful planning consent, and then they have a planning condition for an arboricultural method statement and a tree protection plan. So the whole thing is done back to front. We rock up and we find that the scheme is unbuildable.
Sorry, what do you mean back to front in terms of they've designed the scheme without incorporating a tree survey?
Yeah, so they've got consent, but they haven't done a tree survey, essentially. And the planning consent, I'm sure you've seen them, tends to have maybe some copy and paste conditions on there. Oh, there's trees, so we'll put that condition in. Or there's ecological constraints, we'll put that condition in. And they will get a planning condition for an arboricultural method statement and a tree protection plan. But in order to produce that document, the steps we outlined before have to be done. Yeah. So, yeah, it could be a difficult one there. Yeah.
Well, look, excellent. That, I think that's really helpful for as a guide to kind of our listeners, is you need to, first thing, get a topo done, which is extremely important. As soon as the topo is done, you can then do a tree survey. Once you've got the outputs of the tree survey, you should start evolving the design with the design team. Once that's done, then you can get an arboricultural impact assessment. And really, there shouldn't be surprises because you already knew the root protection area. If there are clashes that they need to build in, they would probably need to discuss with yourselves whilst they're looking at the designs, as you mentioned. And then once they've got the arboricultural impact assessment, they can go forward to planning. And if those trees, if their development are close to some kind of high quality trees, then they might need the arboricultural method statement and tree protection plan to demonstrate to the local authority that how those trees will be protected.
Yeah, perfect summary. Trees first, not last, is what we say.
Yeah, awesome, excellent. And then kind of some questions I wanted to quickly ask you as well was, you already mentioned the topo, but what information do you need from a client in order to have everything you need to be able to start your tree survey?
So we need the topographical survey as a AutoCAD.dwg or .dxf file. That's the absolute base for us. We need a Google Earth tile or a KML of the red line boundary of the site. So that is really, really useful information. And that's all we need, really, right at the very start.
So you can't have a PDF redline boundary, because that's very typical in the industry, isn't it?
We can do, but what we often find with that is that it's quite often extremely zoomed in. Now, some projects it's very, very easy to find the site location, but you'd be amazed how many inquiries we get coming into the business who, you've got a block plan on there and you can just about read something close on it or something avenue, and you're like, well, this is all very well and good, but we actually need to know where this site is located. I'm sure as part of the RenKap system, that's something that would be audited out. But outside of that's a real problem for us sometimes. Yeah. The amount of time we spend having to find out where the actual site is. So on the larger schemes, if someone's savvy enough to send over a KML or a drop pin of the centre of the site or what 3 words or something like that, we can then orientate ourselves. So.
Yeah, no, excellent. Yeah, well, in our system, we provide the PDF redline boundary that has been reviewed, plus the what 3-word location, just to help orientate. Because sometimes, you get a PDF and you're like, where in the world is this?
Yes.
But yeah, no, excellent. What did you say? A Google tile? Google Map
just
tile.
a Google KML or something like that. I mean, these days it's extremely quick to create a Google Earth shape file on the desktop, and most people engaged in site investigation and commissioning surveys will have that capability. So that is that's really, really useful to us.
Cool. Okay, so topo, redline boundary, location. Anything else?
No, that's pretty much it to kick off a tree survey. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
The British Standard says that we should go to site with no knowledge of the proposals. The reality is we always know pretty much what's going to be happening. Yeah. So if they've got details of the proposals, yes, I mean, it's useful to have an eye on that, because it may well just sway the manner in which you collect the data.
Yeah.
If there's somewhere that's a little bit more key. So.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to clients in order to work with qualified and competent, capable surveyors to do tree surveys? What should they be looking out for?
We tend to find that you can play this game either way. So most arboricultural consultants tend to be small one-man bands, which means you get a highly personalised service. They tend to have a very good working relationship with the local tree officer, but they tend to be overworked, and the consistency of the experience can be very, very difficult. The flip side is working with a larger practice. There tends to be more capability, possibly an argument that there might be some more professionalism within that organisation. However, you do usually tend to pay a little bit more for that. In terms of checking out the background of the consultant, again, it's really difficult because actually there is no formal qualification for the collection of the data. It just has to be collected to the British Standard. So there are cases where architects, homeowners have collected the tree data themselves. Where it starts to get tricky is with the analysis of that data. So really, you want to have a look at the principal consultant within the business or the lead consultant within the business. Have a look at their LinkedIn profile, their company bio, whatever. They should preferably be members of the Arboricultural Association, which is our trade association. But my personal opinion, controversial, and I'll put it out there, most of these things do tend to be pay us some money, we'll give you a badge. It doesn't necessarily mean that person is competent. However, the Arboricultural Association do a good job, and they're the people we've got. So look for membership of the Arboricultural Association. Look for at least foundation degree, FDSC in ARB and above qualification. The Institute of Chartered Foresters have taken in arboriculture, so we're starting to see more and more arboricultural consultants. advanced in their career who are now either associates or full members of the Institute of Chartered Foresters. But what I would do, my top tip is always just to have a quick Google, because if a company is putting a lot of tree reports out there into the public domain, their information is going to be out there on local planning portals. It will be coming up in a Google search. You'll be seeing the quality of their work. So
excellent. Okay, awesome. Well, there you have it. Thank you very much, Matt. That at the end of our podcast, I always like to ask a question about abortive costs, which is essentially any money that is spent on a project that might be lost because of some information that wasn't realized at an earlier stage. And there's many of these in the industry, loads of examples. And I feel like my personal opinion is industry is plagued with abortive costs throughout the whole process, and we need to work harder on sharing learnings and reducing them. So we always like to ask our guests to share a story of a time where they've seen abortive costs kind of rear its head in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I could bore you for another 40 minutes on that one, definitely. And
we'll do that one at the pub.
Yeah, I will pre-frame this by saying it's not just. These days, it's not just abortive costs in terms of an actual currency number. I think we also have to look at abortive costs in terms of the impact to the environment as well, and works that are being carried out, carbon that is being created that potentially need not be. So I'll put that out there to one side. One very short story. I sort of mentioned it earlier, but very often projects get done back to front from an arboricultural perspective. So this particular client, they achieved planning consent. It was mostly a brownfield site for conversion of an industrial to residential, and I think it was a demolition rebuild. It was occupying nearly the same footprint but pushing out to the boundary fence line, and there was going to be like a party wall agreement, etc. Off-site was a linear feature of high-quality mature trees that were identified by the local planning authority before they issued planning consent. So this customer got a planning consent with a decision notice that said there was a planning condition for an arboricultural method statement and a tree protection plan. Okay, fine. The local authority wants confidence that these trees are going to be protected through the development phase. That's awesome. Customer, when we quoted, hadn't sent us the plans, so we were instructed. We kept pushing. We got the plans. We deployed a surveyor to site who captured the tree information and produced the tree constraints plan retrospectively. That comes back to the office. We cross-reference the two drawings and discover that this is totally unbuildable. The linear feature of off-site trees is protected by a tree preservation order. There are stems of the actual main trunk of the tree. In one instance, was 700 mil from someone's window, so they're looking literally at the tree trunk. The low branches of the trees would have been completely impacting the building. It was totally unbuildable.
Yeah.
So I issued the good news via video to them, and I said, I can't produce this report for you. And that scheme was shelved in the end.
Yeah, wow.
So the local authority had dropped the ball there because they've given them planning consent, but actually it's a criminal offence to damage a tree that's protected by a tree preservation order. And there was no way of building that scheme without damaging the off-site trees. So they didn't even own the trees, so removal wasn't even an option.
Yeah. Incredible. And that... The design stage they got to, so they got to pretty much nearly to planning. So they must have been design stage, RIBA stage 3.
At least.
So they must have paid lots of design fees, architects, engineers, to get that scheme to where it got to, and then had to be shelved because of something they could have. Ideally, if they followed the process we discussed earlier, topo tree survey, they would have seen that information before putting too much money into it. So the whole
scheme had to be torn up. New planning application, go back in, building to occupy the same footprint. Then, of course, does the site become viable? Can they get the units on there they need to make it viable? Huge problems. And I'm not just saying this, but that comes up once or twice a month on various different sizes of schemes. So yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And these are kind of the learnings that we need to be pushing to the industry to help that not happen again. But look, Matt, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your insights with us and the audience. And I just want to share with the audience as well that Matt has his own podcast, Ask the Arb. You can see it there in the background if you're watching, and we'll put the details in the comments. And Matt, you've also got a book, tree survey book.
Yeah, so much criticised actually by industry peers, but I wrote this book, The Planning Application Hack, and it's deliberately, this is the Architect's edition, it's deliberately clickbaity. I make no apologies for that, and the reason for that is because it covers pretty much everything we've spoken about just here in straight talking English, layman's language. You know, this is
just how we like it.
That you've got to do this, but this is how you've got to do it. So yeah, it's you can find it on Amazon if you're interested.
Yeah, amazing. And if anyone from the audience wants to get in touch, Matt, and potentially be part of your podcast or whatever it might be, how should they best get in?
So the best way to get in contact with me is you can find me on LinkedIn. If you search Matthew Harmsworth Roavr Group on LinkedIn, that's the easiest way to find me. Send me a message, and then it won't get stuck through the usual business channels. So yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much. And thank you all for listening. See you next week.
Thank you very much.